Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Donna, for inviting me today. I had no idea there were going to be so many people here. Now, I know reflexology is strong in Ontario because I've met quite a lot of reflexologists in 2016 when Bev hosted, but since through the online training as well. So thank you. So for those who don't know me, I'm just going to introduce myself a little bit and talk about my work, just to give you an introduction. But I always say to people, the only silly question is one not asked. So if you've got any questions for me, make a note and we can chat about it after I've finished speaking. But I do welcome questions. You know, how often do we hesitate and say, oh, I'm sorry, this might be a silly question? No, no, we don't have silly questions. As I said, the only silly question is one not asked. Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to thank Donna for inviting me to join you here today. And I'm going to start by telling you a little bit more about me and reflexology lymph drainage, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. So I'm guessing everybody here is a reflexologist, so you all understand that the joy of having reflexology in your life, that never get sick of it, always feel like there's more to learn, and the more you learn, the less you know. Well, I'm still on that page as well. So I'm the creator of Reflexology Lymph Drainage. Some of you may have heard about the work, affectionately known really as RLD. It was developed from first principles and through extensive clinical practice. And I'm really proud to say that this approach to reflexology has actually attracted national and international awards, including one from the Lymphedema Network in the US. So there's interest in the US in the work. And I know Canada's a very big place, and you know, each state has their own rules and things, but I believe some RLD practitioners are beginning to make quite good inroads into the lymphedema community within Canada, which is very exciting. So it's really just growing, and it's growing organically. But so I've been a reflexologist since 2005, and I have to say I still love it just as much as ever. Like most of us, you know, we're very, very lucky to love what we do in such a way. So I'm a great believer that once you get your qualification, you know, that piece of paper that says, oh, you know, I'm a competent reflexologist now, this for me is when the real learning begins. And again, you know, the more I learn, the less I know. And I often wonder what would have happened if I'd become a reflexologist at a younger age, because I was in my mid-40s when I came to it. But on the other hand, I think you bring your past life experiences into your therapy journey, or therapy life, therapy world, whatever you want to call it. My past life, I usually call it. And by that, I mean before I found reflexology, or rather, you know, before it found me. So I started talking without sharing the slides, so just a sec. Okay, so this was, I was going to start with that slide. I'm just going to move that across there so we can see. Out. And my dog just pushed the door open and came in. Okay, so for my first slide, so that one's just a copy of my book that I have finally got to write. This is something that I always like to talk about, and it resonates so well with us as a reflexology community. This is actually a Japanese philosophy. It's an ikigai. That's what it's called. And for me, this illustration absolutely sums up reflexology and what reflexology has been for me. And I think it's something that probably resonates with most of us. It might be in a slightly different way. So in Japan, the ikigai philosophy is everyone has a purpose, a motivating force. It brings meaning and fulfillment to your life, while also contributing to the good of others. And this, for me, is certainly what you can in each circle here. So it's what you love, and we do love doing this. It's what you're good at, and we are good at it. It's what we do. Reflexology is not a competition. It's something that we all do. We give it our best each time we give somebody a treatment. It's something we can be paid for, and it's something that the world needs more of, as far as I'm concerned. It's a passion, it's a profession, it can be a vocation, but for me, it's also a mission. And that little word there, just in here, is really what drives my desire to share the reflexology lymph drainage, the research, the techniques. And you might find that you have a different mission. It depends your reason for being a reflexologist. Some of you may be on a mission to help lots of families with infertility problems. Some of you may be on a mission to bring comfort and support in palliative care, or whatever. You know, reflexology can be used in so many different settings. So in my early years as a reflexologist, I worked in supportive cancer care, and I did this for many years and absolutely loved it. I used to treat between 20 and 30 patients a week, and seeing how this gentle complementary therapy brought so much help and comfort to all, not just to the patients, and right from from when they first came into the clinics, maybe they'd been referred there, or to maybe end of life. But we also supported families and carers, because there's a ripple effect when cancer visits a family or touches a loved one. There is a ripple effect on the people around them. So reflexology could, help everybody in so many ways. And the reflexology sessions at the clinics were time limited. This was due to the number of patients that came in. You didn't have a whole hour, and you didn't know who was coming in. So, or who you were going to see, or what they were going to present with, and how they were going to feel on that day. So I used to ask the patients, what would you most like help with today? Before deciding how best to proceed with an adaptive and a kind of targeted problem-specific reflexology session. And it would focus on the area that was relevant to the individual. For me, that was the important part. Rather than use that 30 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes, depending how busy they were, to try and go through all the reflexes quickly, I would just adapt it to best meet the needs of the individual. And for some, this could just be a gentle, relaxing session to help with the high levels of stress and anxiety often associated with cancer diagnosis and treatments. Many of you will be aware that there are some well-documented unpleasant physical side effects of cancer treatments, even just nausea and fatigue. But it's never that simple. It's never just one thing. It's often complex, because there's such a knock-on effect on everyone around you. But one of the things that was a common recurring thing for anybody who works in cancer care or has had experience in this field, you'll find that many patients often present with constipation. They might have all this awful stuff going on, and you say, what would you most like help with today? And they might say, almost in jest, well, love, I haven't been to the toilet for a week. If you can help me with that, that would be fantastic. And as reflexologists, we know how brilliant reflexology is for digestive imbalances and digestive issues. So, because the constipation can be caused by painkillers, so anybody who's taking on strong painkillers. So I would do an adaptive treatment, and even now I would always start an adaptive treatment in this way if it was shortened. I would start with the diaphragm and work across that, because that covers your 10 zones, quickly and easily across the 10 zones. Then I would work down the spinal reflex, following the line of the bone as I came down. But you only really need to go as far as the 12th thoracic vertebrae, because what you really want to be working there is the spinal cord. You think about the nerves. If you work from cervical 1 to thoracic 12, the nerves will go to just about everything else. So by now, in a very short time, you've kind of worked everything. And then it's time to give a more tailored and focused session. And in the case of constipation, this would be all the digestion and elimination reflexes worked as they would with the body. So you're not going against the function. And I know I'm probably preaching to the converted here, but for anybody whose clients have had constipation and digestive issues, you will know how sometimes before you've even quite finished giving the treatment, the patient says, oh, that's great, but I have to go. I need to get off the couch now. And I often used to get a text in the afternoon from a patient mid-afternoon saying something like, I just had a really big poo, thank you. And I know only a reflexologist can understand the joy of receiving a text message like that. But to cut a long story short, while I was working in this way, you would try to adapt, as I said, to whatever patients came. And there were lots of people there who had lymphedema. There were lots of people who had were affected by breast cancer. And in the UK, the figures for breast cancer risk is 1 in 8 for women of a lifetime risk of diagnosis and treatment. And for men, it's 1 in 1,014. And of those, approximately 20% of people who've had treatment will end up with lymphedema in their arm. So for those of you who aren't, I'm just going to give you a brief bit of information about lymphedema, but it's a debilitating condition for which there is currently no cure. Only very limited management options. These include exercise, compression garments, manual lymph drainage massage. And cancer causes include surgery, radiotherapy, site of the tumour. And it isn't just cancer surgery that can lead to secondary lymphedema. So anything where the lymphatic system is disrupted. So at the clinics, there was another therapist there who used to do manual lymph drainage, which is a specialised form of massage, but she was off for prolonged periods of time. And so I wasn't qualified in MLD. I was qualified in advanced massage, but not MLD. So it occurred to me, and I understood it. So it occurred to me, what if I apply the principles of MLD to the lymphatic reflexes of the feet to see if this will cause an effect? I mean, you may know, you may even be qualified MLD therapists yourself, but certainly in the UK, access to these services, the specialist type of massage, is often limited. It's very much a postcode lottery here. In some areas, the services are good, and in other areas, there's just nobody doing the work. And I hope for your sake and all of your clients that these services are better in Canada than they are here. So I'm aware some people are putting hands up. I'm just going to come out of that a second. Stop the share. So does anybody want to ask any questions now, or did you want to ask at the end? Or Carol, if you're doing the admin part, do you want to take questions in the chat and then I'll come to them afterwards? How would you best like to do this?
I think you should just continue on and finish your talk, if that's okay, and then we'll have the questions at the end, and then it won't.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. And will you take questions? I know a couple of people have put their hand up, and I'm just checking that everything's okay. Right, I'll carry on. I'll go back to the screen share.
Yeah, I think everything's fine.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. So this was based on the principles of MLD, because MLD is also used for primary lymphedema and lipodema as well. And you will also find that RLD makes a great difference to people who have these other conditions. But before I carry on anymore with talking about RLD, I'm just going to explain a little bit about manual lymph drainage for those who don't know. It's a specialist type of gentle massage, a technique developed by the Vodders. So you may have heard of the Vodder method of MLD. Quite frankly, it's a global brand. But they first started working with the lymphatic system in the late 1930s, believing that by gently working the superficial tissue, so gently along the skin, they were purifying the body. And at the time, it was actually considered to be taboo to tamper with lymphatics, but the Vodders were undeterred. They first presented their findings in the 1940s and dedicated the rest of their lives to building this global brand. And the Vodder method is probably still the most well-known. It's certainly the most expensive to train in. But there were others as well who built on the work. Other methods included Leduc, Casley-Smith, and Foldy. And these methods each have a slight variation in terms of routine and hand movements, but they all adhere to the same basic principles of a similar theme. The aim is to increase the function of the immune system and the drainage function of the lymphatic system. Because after all, if you're moving the lymph around, then you've got to be affecting the immune function as well. So MLD is performed by applying a sort of slow, rhythmical, repetitive moves, which gently stretch the skin, just with specialized hand movements. And the aim is to activate the contraction of the lymphatic vessels to encourage the lymph to move forward. So the more I work with RLD, and see the results from other RLD trained reflexologists, the more I believe that the Vodders actually had a point. They were really onto something. Because this work, although it was developed to specifically help people with breast cancer related lymphedema, what we find is that it's also helping patients with other presenting conditions, similar things that would be helped by MLD. And the beauty of this is people don't have to get undressed to have it done. So if you rewind back to the beginning, when you're working with people who've had breast cancer and are left with lymphedema, swelling in the arm, to have manual lymph drainage, they would have to get undressed. But to have RLD, all you have to do is remove your shoes and socks. And body image can be an issue for people post-surgery. So that's another advantage, although I am self-confessed biased. I'm biased. So there is also something called simple lymph drainage, and it's a simplified version of MLD. It's a form of self-help exercise, like a basic steps that people can do. So people can do it on themselves, and this is to help reduce the swelling and to manage the lymphedema, ideally in between having MLD treatments, but they really aren't available to a lot of people. Certainly in the locality where I live, most people would get one appointment a year with the lymphedema service for a checkup. They might get given a new compression garment and measured, very little hands-on treatment being done. Anyway, next slide. So this one is just to explain that RLD was based on the principles of MLD and SLD. The therapist at the hospice used to do manual lymph drainage with patients. She had lymphedema groups that she worked with, and she also did these simple lymph drainage exercise groups with some of the patients. So when she wasn't there and they weren't having their treatments, they're like, I don't suppose you can do anything for my arm, can you? Because it's, it's getting painful, it's aching. I understood what she was doing, and it was her method that I transposed onto the feet. As I say, obviously with the consent of the patients. So I just mirrored this on, and using the anatomical reflection of reflexology. I don't know about you, but for me, foot maps are great. They're great when you're first learning. We all need foot maps, but they're also different as well. So I think once you've got your confidence, so you're no longer dependent on looking at a foot map, because everybody's feet are different, their bodies are different. I think it's okay to work things out for yourself, which is exactly what I did here. And as I said, I am qualified in advanced massage, but I was not qualified in MLD, but I understood it having worked closely with my colleagues, and simultaneously, because I felt I wanted more knowledge, I enrolled at the local university where they had a BSc honours degree in complementary therapy. So I was studying and working, which was a wonderful learning experience, because you're able to apply your learning. It's a good hands-on way of doing it. I was very fortunate. I always felt very blessed to have the job at the hospice. So the original RLD protocol is the foundation of the course that I teach, but the set protocol, again, is what it's all based on. It was formalised as part of the NHS ethics application. So NHS is our National Health Service, and if you're working on patients that are part of the National Health Service, you need to get ethical approval. And for this, I had to give very detailed information about the sequence, because it has to be followed, because the ethics panel need to know that you're not going to do any harm to potentially vulnerable patients. So that was a lot of paperwork and a lot of hoops to jump through. In fact, it's probably more work than my final year dissertation altogether. Anyway, I was on, here's the mission. Here's the mission part of the Ikigai. Because this worked, and I knew I wanted to help bring relief to as many people as I could. Anyway, so further on, I'll share some resources to find the links to more information about the research, which you'll be able to find on my website afterwards. So it was my natural curiosity, it was that what if moment that really drove this, the idea of how can I best help this patient. So it was the what would happen if I applied the principles of MLD to the reflexes. I'm a reflexologist, I'm qualified to do that, I'm insured to do that, but I wouldn't be to attempt to do MLD. So as I said, it was with the permission of the patients. And what we started noticing was patients saying, oh, I can feel the same sensation, or, oh, look, I think my sleeve's a bit looser, or, oh, look at my rings. And another thing that happens with MLD is patients experience increased urination, greater volume or darker urine changes. And patients were getting the same physiological responses to RLD as they get to MLD. So one day I took a tape measure in, and we measured around an arm before and after. And it turned out the patients weren't just imagining their clothes are looser or their jewellery was looser. There was actually a measurable reduction in the swelling. And luckily there's a standardised way of measuring arm volume. And I went and did some training in that, because there's very little research evidence, measurable evidence available for reflexology. We know it works, but we're preaching to the converted. What we need to do is to get the word out there about the benefits of reflexology. So in the first small research study, which was part of my final year dissertation for the degree, 6 women received RLD once a week for 4 consecutive weeks. Even though the study was done over 6 weeks. At week 1, it was just a baseline measurement, no treatment, and more data collection, consent forms and all of that sort of paperwork. And then the 4 weeks in the middle, so 2, 3, 4, and 5, they received RLD. And then week 6 was no treatment again. So my next slide. That's the wrong slide. Okay. I've got the wrong slide there. Okay. So I just was going to say that the data collection tools I used were limb volume circumference measurement, which is a standardized set of measurements. It's objective. And I also used a subjective outcome measure called Measure Yourself Concerns and Wellbeing, also known as MyCore. And in that, patients are asked 2 concerns, which they then score on what we call a 7-point scale, because it's from 0 to 6 and the 0 counts. So I did things like to eliminate any bias in the swelling, because lymphedema swelling can fluctuate throughout the day. It can depend on lots of things, activity, temperature, all sorts of things. So to eliminate that bias of daily fluctuations in the swelling, I saw each person at the same time. So when they came at week 1, the 10 o'clock person, she was 10 o'clock right the way through. And that eliminated the bias, because maybe she's more swollen in the evening and it's gone down again in the morning. So seeing everybody at the same time eliminated that. And participants were, as I said, measured at week 1, and then they were measured before and after every treatment. And I'm not going to go into all this, but I'm going to just show you, to give you a rough idea of what the figures were here. So participant 1, she was 62. She'd had it for 7 years in her right dominant arm, and her arm was 15.4% bigger than her normal arm, and it contained 358.96 mils of fluid. In the 6-week period of the study, so that's 4 treatments, she lost this much from that, which meant that by the end of the study, her arm had gone from being 15.4% bigger to only 3%, which is within the realms of normal. And that would be the same for all these people. These 2 here, number 4 and number 5, they were left-handed, and that's why they're in that column. And we see number 5 here, she'd had it for 10 years, and she actually had a very swollen forearm and hand. And when I talk about doing the measurements, the only bit we can measure is the, I'm not sure if you can see it, the cylinder of the arm. So from the armpit to the wrist, that doesn't include any fluid that's in the hand or in the shoulder, under the arm, or the adjoining area at all. So those are the measurable figures. And nobody here had a swelling greater than 20%. So these aren't even considered to be bad cases. These are just get on and live with it, you know, wear a compression garment. And in fact, only one of these ladies, number 5, was compliant with a compression. And that's because she had to wear a glove as well, because she had a very swollen hand. So what we do here now is we look for recurring themes. And we see this is baseline week 1. And then this is everybody before treatment for the first reflexology treatment at week 2, before and immediately after measure again. And we see that everybody, all 6 ladies, lost the most during their first treatment. And then the next week they came back, it'd gone up a bit and then down, before, after, and then week 6, just follow up. So everybody lost the most here, and then subsequent treatments helped to consolidate those results. And that's the sort of pattern that you would expect to see from manual lymph drainage. So something is definitely happening here. Anyway, once you get me started talking about this, it's hard to stop me. You might have to boot me out of your Zoom meeting. Okay, so the MyCore also picked up patient concerns and comments. So these are some of the comments. And for those, I know Bev and Donna, you both do RLD, and I couldn't see all the other names, but they 2 jumped out to me. So you will understand this, you'll recognize these sort of comments, you know, it feels lighter. And people say, I feel lighter. So even people who don't have lymphedema, they can feel lighter in themselves, more energized, no more bulges. I feel like I've got my arm back. I feel good about myself. Because as the swelling reduces, people's self-confidence starts to pick up and improve. You know, not embarrassed to take my cardigan off, my shoulders not hurt, pain's gone. I could go on and on and on with those. Okay, so since then we also did another research study, and you can find the link to the research abstract on my website, which I'll show you in a minute, but this is one of the quotes that came from that. And it just reminds me of how much body image is affected by a diagnosis like breast cancer, and then surgery and treatment, and what you get left with, or what you can be left with after, and how that can have such a negative impact on quality of life. Anyway, so I've got some more images here. This image is on my website actually, but I just want to tell you, this is somebody who came into the second research study before and after. This mark here is where she took her garment off first to measure her arm. And you can see, this is immediately after one treatment. You can see here the changes to her skin and how much the swelling has gone down. But when she came in, she said, oh, I can't wear my watch or my rings on this hand at the moment. And we remeasured her and she went to the bathroom, because people often need to rush to the bathroom after this. And as she was getting dressed again, putting her cardigan back on to go, she said, oh, I wonder if my watch will go on there now. Now, she couldn't wear that when she came in. So we are definitely affecting the lymphatic system, the drainage. Anyway, so coming on to sharing you so for those of you, there's a Reflexology Lymph Drainage Facebook group. It's quite a big group, and you can search that and find all sorts of information about things that people have used it for. I have a Facebook page about reflexology. You're also welcome. There's Instagram and YouTube as well. So it's always good to connect with fellow reflexologists. So the other research that we've done, well, first of all, let me say, a lot of people say, oh, I've researched that, and maybe they have. But to get a research paper published in a peer-reviewed journal gives it credibility. And this, the research, the RLD research has been published, and then you build on that with further studies. So after the first small study, we did another one with 26 participants, and 2 research papers have been published from that. I'll show you in a minute where you can get those links. And then the latest piece of research was some thermal imaging, because patients often feel temperature changes or a trickle or movement going on in the body when they have RLD, when they receive it. So we wondered if thermal imaging technology would pick up on this, and I'm proud to say it did. And that research paper crossed over from being peer-reviewed journal, Complementary Therapies in Clinical Practice, into the British Journal of Community Nursing. That felt like a really big and important step to have it in a nursing journal. So just to sort of sum up a little bit, RLD teaches us how a reflexology treatment enables tangible and intangible outcomes to be measured, and why data collection and analysis is beneficial to our profession. So if you consider the value in the eyes of other healthcare providers, and importantly, those who are responsible for the allocation of future healthcare funding and policy making decisions. So the VODers, what they were doing 80 years ago was taboo. It was taboo, it was frowned upon. And that's only 80 years ago. So I feel we're not that far behind them, because now MLD is mainstream, if there are enough people trained to do it. Anyway, so in the last decade, it has been my mission to reach and teach as many reflexologists around the world as possible, because I know the impact RLD has. And then there's this wonderful ripple effect on quality of life and self-confidence. So my mission has taken me to many wonderful places, and I hope to go to some of these places again. But lockdown has also meant that the training has become accessible to more people in countries that I wouldn't have been able to go to. So, all things for a reason. And anyway, I'm just going to share the slide for the research. Okay, so this is a screenshot of my website, and there's a research tab here for anybody. Then there's a drop-down menu, and each of there's a link to the research there. The research abstracts are there, and in the heading, it will take you to the actual journal if you wanted to see the full paper. I don't have access to that, but on the website there isn't free access to that because journals are journals, but on the website you can certainly see the research abstracts. So thank you. I'm going to stop the screen share now and see if anybody has any questions or comments you might like to make. You might need to unmute if you want to ask a question.
Don't be shy.
Oh, hi, Donna. Does anybody want to ask a question? I can't see all the screens.
Oh, okay. I did have a question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sandra.
Sandra.
Yes, my question is, does lymphedema, can it affect the legs and the feet as well?
Yes, it can.
Okay.
Yes. So there's primary lymphedema and secondary lymphedema.
Okay.
Secondary lymphedema is like second to accident, injury, trauma, surgery. So that's when the system you were born with a functioning properly system, but it's been damaged. Primary lymphedema is something that has a genetic predisposition, and it tends to develop in people at time of hormonal change. So some people who might say, oh, my legs are like my grandmother's, getting like my grandmother's when I get to the menopause, that sort of thing, they become heavy legs. But it's usually at the time of menopause, pregnancy, puberty is when it's likely to develop, and there's usually a family pattern.
So my mom had mastectomy.
Okay.
And she had lymph nodes removed, obviously.
Okay.
And she's had this swelling in her legs and her feet, like her ankles and her feet. And when I read your book, I was like, oh my God. It's like, I wonder if there is a collation here. You didn't talk about the legs, but, and I'm so excited. Your book is amazing, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much.
Absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. I just received your DVD.
Okay.
So I just got it today. So I'm excited to do that. And I'm looking forward to doing the course as well. I'm just looking for dates. And thank you for doing this online because
you're welcome. Thank you.
It allows us from Canada to have access to these amazing courses. So thank you for that.
Thank you. So I do have a course in July. It's UK evenings, 6 to 9, 4 evenings in the UK, but that would be daytime in Ontario. I think you're maybe about 5 hours.
I think it's 5 hours, yeah.
Okay, so that would be 5 hours. It would be a 1 o'clock start for you, 4 afternoons. The July course would be suitable for that.
Okay, I'll check into that one.
Thank you very much.
For sure. Thank you so much, Sally. Thank you.
So anybody
Anyone
else
who hasn't taken this course, you need to jump on because it's an excellent one.
Thank you, Bev. I know you've put it to a lot of good use, haven't you? You've been using it in your practice, for the last 6 years.
Well, yeah, and every single one of my clients receives some RLD at some point during the session. I don't just do with cancer patients and do a full RLD protocol. So
Yeah.
every single one of my clients is receiving some RLD, which is very helpful, no matter what you look at, because of the lymph system. The lymph system is a really important system.
Yeah.
So if we can clear the lymph system out, which you're doing with RLD, you're going to keep the person, your immune system, a little bit better, in a better position.
So what we also find, I mean, there's so much to talk about. It's really, really hard to cram stuff into half an hour or an hour. But what we also find is the techniques are really helpful with clients with autoimmune, any inflammatory autoimmune stuff going on. Yeah. Techniques are really helpful for them too.
Well, I know with all my own autoimmune disorders, it's been very helpful for me.
Yeah.
And I like to see that I can help others that are also suffering from or afflicted by autoimmune disorders. You know what? I still thank you so much, Sally, for bringing it to Canada in 2016, and keep up the good work.
I always say you made it happen.
No, we made it happen together.
But so there's Bev's mission there, helping lots of other people with inflammation and autoimmune stuff going on in their bodies. So anybody else have
Marlene, Marlene, can you turn on your screen?
Let me check.
Maybe.
No. Okay.
Hi, Ro, Sally. It's nice to see you again. It's Tina Quinlan.
Oh, hi, Tina. Hi.
So I am so excited to share that I worked on a lady 2 weeks ago who contacted me and said, "You're magical." I have been peeing for since like all day. And so she's excited to book again. And she was inquiring, how often should I come and see you? And I said, well, you could come once a week to once a month. I'll leave it up to you, really, whatever you're led by. But I am curious to know, how often can we see for the lymph? I know I've probably asked this question.
No, other people might be thinking it as well. Don't be apologising for asking a question. Manual lymph drainage can be done daily in some circumstances. So, but one of the problems with that is one rule doesn't fit all, because clients are so different. It depends on any other presenting conditions, any other, comorbidities, whatever's going on. I think you have to take each person as an individual. But if you're seeing somebody who's, okay in herself, there's nothing else no red flags, nothing for concern. If she'd like to come and see you a couple of times a week, that would be fine. If she's got a lot of swelling and she felt the benefit of it, was that her first treatment? Has she just had one?
It was her first treatment.
So the other thing, which you remember from the graph for everybody, people tend to lose the most during the first treatment, and then subsequent treatments help to consolidate those results. So I think keep working away at it and keep getting a reduction. Yes, you could see her a few times a week providing she was well enough, and that didn't cause her any financial pressure as well, because that's the other thing we have to consider, isn't it? When you're saying to people, "Oh, you need to come every week," and they might be thinking, "Oh no," So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. It was nice to see you.
And Sally?
Yes.
I'm promoting your book.
Thank you.
Excellent book.
Thank
you. See all my sticky notes in there, right?
Oh, there's others with their books as well. Oh, that's really lovely. Thank you.
Excellent.
So Amazon and online book retailers have it. It's often quicker than trying to get it sent from the UK. Excuse me, I'm just... Sorry, I muted. I haven't read the chat box, I'm sorry.
Let me just jump in here then for you, Sally. It's Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Sandra Murphy says, thank you, so interesting. Susan Smith, this is fascinating. I've just ordered the book. Great. Thank you so much, Sally. Catherine Bebb, could this help with extreme allergies?
Well, it helps with arthritis, it does help with arthritis. That's not what I was going to say. Hay fever, that sort of acute rhinitis, that drainage. And so I would say yes, as much as you're allowed to. You know how you're not allowed to claim to treat conditions, or we aren't, only to help or support clients with particular conditions. But as a general rule of thumb, you see, because MLD is that much further on than us, MLD is, it's widely accepted now. MLD can claim to treat all kinds of conditions. So for me, if MLD is good for something, RLD is good for something. And I've yet to find anything to prove different. So I like a bit of evidence, as you might have gathered. It's really, the evidence is what supported my mission to really get this work out there, because, well, as I said, it started about being breast cancer related lymphedema. And even though people are maybe free of the cancer, that's being cured and treated, they're left with this debilitating condition, which impacts. So to be able to have some reflexology, which is lovely to receive anyway, and get a reduction in swelling, it's work that I'm on a mission to get out there. So at the moment, I'm the only person anywhere who teaches this work, because it's all my own work. And it's just a joy. It's an absolute joy to meet people and to hear their stories. So Tina's she's done one RLD session for a client and has already had incredible feedback. So patient voice is a loud one. Patient voice, when they go to their healthcare providers and they say, look, I've had this reflexology, it makes the authorities sit up and pay attention to the work. And that's how it's organically growing and gaining momentum. So thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Carol, were there any more questions?
Hi,
13
this is Sabina. In reflexology, we are trained to do lymph drainage, and I'm not familiar with your work. Is it very different than the lymph drainage that we are taught in reflexology in our sessions already?
Do you know what? I don't know, because so many reflexology schools teach things so differently. It would be very difficult for me to comment on anybody else's training. I mean, worldwide, literally, RLD has taken me from Alaska to Auckland, and I've met so many reflexologists, and everybody has different ways of doing things. I'm not somebody who believes in right and wrong either. I think there are many ways of doing something, and we do our best for each client. So I couldn't really comment on what you're doing, but my treatment is targeted to mirror manual lymph drainage through the feet. It's a very focused, very specific treatment. And actually, when you're doing research, all the participants had the same condition. They all had breast cancer-related lymphedema in one arm. As a reflexologist, it's actually really hard to do the same treatment on people, but you have to for the research. So you've got your comparison. Rather than, how often are we doing something and we think, oh, what's going on with your shoulder? We do a little bit more there, or we do a little bit more in the neck. When you're doing research, you can't work like that. So it would be very hard for me to say or to comment, But if you've worked in any cancer care, if you've worked with anyone with lymphedema and maybe measured the reduction, that's when you start to think, I wonder, perhaps if we do it that way, or if we do it that way, how can I improve this? How can I best help this client? So I hope that answers a bit of a vague answer, but that's the best I can manage. So many different reflexology schools.
There's a question here that's asking, is a teacher's course coming out?
Is a teacher's course coming out? Yes and no. There's nothing actually happening imminently. But my long-term goal is to train trainers. But it isn't just about learning the technique and then thinking, oh, I'll just teach that technique on, because you need a wealth of experience of using the work yourself. You really need to know it inside and out. Because if this work is to stand up in the healthcare profession and other people are kind of thinking, oh, I'll just teach that, and then it gets diluted and it loses its way, then that research, which is a decade's worth of work, is lost. Because done properly, this works every time, without fail. It never doesn't work. Some results are better than others, but it works every time. And so it would be a real shame for people to say, oh, I want to try that reflexology for my lymphedema, and then it's, you know, it's been diluted or it's lost its potency. It would be a real shame for the work if people go, oh, that didn't work. I'd be like, yeah, it does work. So that is my, I would say, a longer term goal. Yeah, for the future sometime, but it will just be a handful of people who are practiced at the work, if and when that happens. Alternatively, I have had all the work filmed. I worked with a video production company a couple of years ago now, just before the lockdown, to have all the work filmed, the training filmed, so that, and I said to my sons, if anything happens to me, just put it all on YouTube. Because I want the work to go on. I want the work to stand up in the future, not just melt into the reflexology pot. Because it can be integrated into a reflexology treatment, but it can stand up very well as a treatment, a standalone treatment, with incredible results. So I hope that answers your questions.
Sandra LaFrance, you had a question?
I do. Can you use this technique on hands as well?
Yes,
or is it just?
Yes. And actually, that was a stroke of luck for me, because I worked with this video production company. It was already in the diary. So the book was done in 2019, finally, after about 7 years. And then 2020's big project was going to be making it modular, recording it all, and making it accessible to people around the world. But the pandemic happened, but part of that recording, it was professionally recorded how to do the hands as well. And so I've been able to use this material for the online training,
Awesome.
which has been really useful. The quality of the material that I've invested in has helped the training to transfer online, because I was a bit reluctant in the beginning because I didn't want it to lose its magic.
Of course.
But it hasn't. It hasn't.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I can tell from, apart from anything, the quality of the case studies that I've had from through the online training has been exceptional. So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you, Sally. Thanks.
Okay, we have time for one more question, if anybody has a question. I believe it's quite late where you are, Sally.
It's supper time.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's fine. No, I made myself available 5 till 6 here.
Okay.
5 till 6.
Okay. So anybody else have a question, or can we let Sally go and have her dinner?
Okay.
There's multiple comments, Sally, about how wonderful this presentation has been. So we all thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I mean, it's just really nice to connect, isn't it? And the pandemic has made the world a smaller place in a way, because we're all so used to this now, aren't we? To working in this way, and connecting and meeting people that you perhaps wouldn't have the opportunity to. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Sally, for your time. And,
thank you. And good luck. Good luck, everyone, on your reflexology journey, on your mission. You know, whatever you're doing with this work, keep it up. It's all brilliant. So
all the best.
Bye now. Bye.
Bye.
All right.